I have extras if we need them. Sure.
You want to project that?
Yeah, I do. I thought maybe you'd take care of that. But. And then I'll close it down so you can see Ken in the audience. That took a lot of training to get that up and ready for you. As you recall, the Personnel Committee has been dealing with looking at staff attendance. And there were a couple of red flags that went out in the October and the November meeting, particularly the November 6th Professional Development Day, and then the Friday before and the Tuesday after Columbus Day that kind of sent up some red flags. I want to start off with reasons for absence. There are several. Some of them I've grouped. And the focus of this report is illness, and I'll tell you why. Reasons for absence: bereavement, things like family medical leave, maternity leave, military duty, professional days, those are your conferences, things of that nature, professional meetings, unpaid leave, personal days. The difference there is those all require approval and pre-planning. So we do have some opportunities to plan on the number of people out on a given day, probably with the exception of the first two. Those things do happen. What we don't really know day to day is what's going to happen in terms of people calling in sick, family illness, a mother staying home to take care of a sick child, or a medical appointment. Sometimes those fall into these categories. So for the purpose of this report and the purpose of what we've been focusing in on personnel has been the illnesses and those other subcategories. The staff groups that we look at typically in personnel, we look at the certified TEA staff, and that is also not just teachers, but other people in that bargaining unit, our guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists, speech therapists, so on and so forth. And we're talking about, over the last several years, a range anywhere from 379 to 390 employees. Administrators, both Torrington Public Schools Administrators Association bargaining unit and central office. Over the years, we've had 19 to 23 employees, currently have 19. Paraprofessionals under Local 1579, I pulled them out only because they're a large group, 122 to 135. And then I grouped the others. Those are nurses, custodians, secretaries, smaller groups, occupational therapists, behaviorists, etc. And we're talking about a group size of approximately, we've ranged 126 to 133. So just for the purpose of this report, we've grouped them together that way. As I said, the Columbus Day was a red flag, so we took a look at Monday holidays since 2009, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Martin Luther King Day, Memorial Day, only because the thing they have in common is they produce a long weekend. We do have things like Thanksgiving, Christmas, things days before week-long vacations, but in looking at the data, we do have information on that. These were the ones that seemed to be of concern. We also looked at professional days, particularly those that fall during the school year. Looked at the data, not a big problem when professional development days precede a school year. although there has been some discussion about is that the most effective time to do PD. The ones that we reviewed were November, which has been consistent since 2009. We've done on election day, we've used that for a professional development day. February has been a little more sporadic through the years. One year we did 2 in February, then we didn't do any. For example, last year we front-loaded them all before the school year. This year we did 1. So we took a look at November and February for the purposes of this discussion. I'll go through the first chart a little more thoroughly, and then I'm going to zip through in the interest of time because you have the data in front of you. What we did was we took a holiday, for example, in this case Labor Day. We took a look at the teacher group, and what we did was we totaled the absences on both the Friday before and the Tuesday after, in this case Labor Day. Then we looked at the rest of the month to get an average, what we would expect on a typical day in that particular month, to give you an idea of the difference between what we can expect on average and what we got. Example, on this one, generally not a problem. Our average days, an average of 2 days compared to the 2 days Monday, Friday and Tuesday, did not show a consistent problem. Of course, 2009, I would be concerned about that particular day. 10, 11, 12, our average for the month, 2 days for the month, was actually greater than the Monday or the Friday, Tuesday combined. So that's how you read it. And the rest are going to follow this pattern. So if anybody has any questions about what I'm trying to show there, now would be a good time to ask because the others will follow. Mr. Nargi.
Good one. On page 5, say for example.
Could I get there and then answer your question?
Oh, I thought.
Yeah, I'll go through them, and if you have a specific question about a page, it might be easier so that everybody's there.
If you understood the format of the.
Is it the format is understood?
Well, I guess the format is, or when we look at these days and you go average absence of all other days, they're all other
What I
days,
did,
or
okay,
just all
yes.
other days around?
That's a format question. Yeah, what I did was I looked at the number of teacher absences, in this case, throughout the month, the various months of September, and then I divided it by the number of work days there were in that particular year in the month of September.
Okay, so
And then I
they're
multiplied by
different
2.
numbers.
Yeah. Yep. Then I went ahead and I looked at administrators, and very quickly, the average absence during the months exceeded, in this case very clearly, the number of administrator absences before and after the Labor Day holiday. There were 0. If you look at paraprofessionals, again, the paraprofessionals through the years, before and after Labor Day, are either at or below the average of all the other days. So it wasn't a particular problem with the paraprofessionals. The other employees, the last 2 years were right at average. Prior to that, they were below average. So nothing striking with the other employees as far as Labor Day. Now, Columbus Day, which we red flagged recently, you'll see in 2009, 2010, we were just about at the average. Then we had a problem in 11, and we're showing a problem in 2012. So the last 2 years, we've had a significant spike in absences due to illnesses with teachers on the Friday before and the Tuesday after the Columbus Day weekend. Again, looking at administrators, I will point out that it's a different scale, different staff. you will see that there were, it's a small group, but they too were above the average this past year. Then you look at paraprofessionals, and again, below this year and about the same in the other years, not a significant problem for paraprofessionals. And then other, Columbus Day, at or below for all the other employees. Then you look at Veterans Day, and you see that while we look good in 2011, we had a slight swell in absences over the average this year, but not significant. And I would say generally Veterans Day, while slightly above in some cases the average, is not a huge problem for us. For the administrators, again, the 2010 was above. We had 3 out on it, and we averaged that particular year during the month of November 1.6 per day, but not a significant problem. And then your other paraprofessionals, once again, slightly above this year, 2 above the average, but generally over the last several years, not a problem with paraprofessionals for Veterans Day. Then your other employees below, except for 2009. I don't know what happened that year, but we had significant difference from the average. Teachers on Martin Luther King Day. A problem last year, we did better this year. We were below the average this year, and the other years. For 2011, I think that did show as a problem. We addressed some of those concerns, and we saw improvement this year. Administrators, below the average except 2011. Paraprofessionals, again, even or below, except for last school year, they were slightly above the average. Martin Luther King, for others, below the average, slightly above this year by 1, not significant. Now Memorial Day looks to be a problem, and was a significant problem last year. We're hoping this Memorial Day, given the attention that we're giving this, that we can improve that number. But Memorial Day for teachers looks to be a problem in the past few years that needs to be addressed. Administrators, no absences, so well below the average. Again, small group. Paraprofessionals, near the average, except for 2010, got a little up there. Other groups below the last 2 years, we're doing well there. So you'll see later in the slides, looks to be Columbus Day and Memorial Day, particularly for teachers, seems to be an area that we're going to have to pay attention to. Then we took a look at Professional Day, so let me take a moment and explain how this slide reads. What we did is we went back. This was the one consistent professional development day. We looked at 2009, 10, 11, and 12. We would expect on a November day to not be above 25, 26 teachers out on average. In 2009, we were significantly above. Better in 2010, about average in 2011, and then up again this year, 2012. So we're asked to identify problems. Again, that November 6th Professional Development Day, seem to be a problem. I also snuck the administrators in on this slide. Those are the only other ones that are expected here on PD days in terms of the certified staff, and they did not miss any of those days and were below average on the professional development days. Now, I did look at February, but it's not as consistent that we have a February day. We did have 2 of them back in 2009, and again, the staff was out well above the average for that month. I'm very pleased to say that I ran the numbers for yesterday's professional development day, and we only had 10 teachers out due to illness. So thank you, Mary and her work with the TEA in getting this word out through personnel that we need for you to be at these professional development days. They're important. And again, I mean, of the 10 that were out, I've gotten some doctor's notes. There's some real reasons why people have to be out, whether it's a professional day or a holiday or otherwise. So a significant improvement yesterday. One of the things the board wanted to see, and I worked with Kelly Services to get this data. We looked at Torrington, which is the red stripe or the dark one on your printout, compared to 3 other similar sized districts, just to kind of get an idea of how we trend through the year with teacher absences. These are teachers now going through. The reason why it's only teachers is Kelly specializes in teacher absences and subs, so they have better data on teachers than other groups. And my conclusion, and you can look at it more carefully on your own, is that we trend very similar to similarly sized school districts that they compared to. I also looked at teacher absences due to illness, and with the help of Kelly Services, got an idea how other districts fare compared to us with absences on professional development days. I will say that this is last year when we didn't have the February day in the mix. We had a good year last year because many of our professional development days were in that preschool or school opening days, so our turnout was much better. But other school districts seem to be struggling with the same things that we are. How have we addressed this in the past? We've asked some individuals in some groups, bargaining units, to get an independent medical evaluation. If we see trends that don't seem to be adding up, and the medical information that they're providing doesn't seem to be adding up, we can, in some cases, ask for an independent evaluation. Of course, we have to pay for that. So there is a cost associated with that. We've obviously requested reasons for absence. We've required medical certificates, and I'll share some of the contract language in a moment. We've shared statistics with the unions, had some general discussions about what the patterns are showing. We've discussed with supervisors so that supervisors can note attendance as part of their evaluations. And we've also had meetings with individuals that are showing patterns of concern. I'm not going to read this to you, but what I did in your packet is I included specific contract language for teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, custodians, secretaries. Generally, we can ask for a medical certificate if we see a pattern. For example, teachers after 7 consecutive days of illness. Superintendent may request the submission of a doctor's certificate recommending additional time off. Failure to comply may result in loss of any additional sick days. So we have some ability there. With the other groups, it's 5 consecutive days that we can do. With some of the Some of the language allows us, again, to ask our own physician or nurse to make necessary examination or investigation when we see a pattern that's a concern. So we do have the opportunity to do some medical investigations if we feel it's necessary. In conclusion, there are a couple of things I think, and I'm open to additional suggestions. Mary and I have already spoken. I've opened up dialogues naturally with 1579. The conclusions that I drew from looking at this data is that teachers are absent due to illness more frequently. Specifically, Columbus Day and Memorial holidays seem to be an area that we need to focus on. Teachers are absent due to illness more frequently when we hold professional development on those November and February days. We need to address that. That generally there are teacher absence patterns that are not unique to Torrington. As we looked at some of the other data. And teacher absences over the 11-12 school year generally were similar to what we saw in other school districts. I have some recommendations. The various bargaining contract language committees, bargaining committees of the board can try to review and negotiate stronger language for attendance, particularly on professional development days. Negotiate stronger language for sick days. One of the things we might want to look at is combining medical appointments with sick days. Many school districts don't do that. Consider district policies regarding employee absence and how we do professional development. I think there's some natural changes coming on board with some of the changes at the state level. We need to discuss with the unions those problematic holidays and professional development days because they're willing to help. Mary has reached out, as has the other groups, because when somebody's out, that puts pressure on everybody else. So we need to work with them, and they're willing to work with us. And we need to continue to address these issues with individual employees. What I obviously couldn't share with you tonight are specific work with people that have attendance issues. We have interesting data both from this study and from previous studies that are able to pinpoint where some problem areas are with individual employees, and we have addressed them, continue to address them, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that the Personnel Committee has gotten involved. Cheryl has been very supportive. The unions have been very supportive at bringing this out, bringing it to light, and trying to do something about it. So I do thank the board for that attention and thank the unions for their support in trying to get to the bottom of this and improve. I think we had a lot of good news. I stopped short of praising people for showing up for work because we ought to be showing up for work. But I think it showed that, yeah, we do have a problem, but they're very focused problems on particular days and can be addressed. Case in point, yesterday's 10 absences. Before I take questions, I would like to thank, there's an awful lot of hours that went into this. I'd like to thank my administrative assistant, Ruth Johnson, and thank Danielle and for loaning me Rosa Daigle from the business department to help crunch these numbers and take a look at it, as well as Joan over at Kelly Services, who helped me in a lot of ways answering questions. So I do appreciate the people putting in the extra time and hours looking at this data. Yes, sir.
Looking at your average daily absences for this current school year, for teachers on or before Labor Day, you said that the September average was 34. was the daily average of absences, roughly 10%.
It's 2 days, Ken, because we're comparing 2 days to 2 days.
I thought the 26 was the 2 days,
The,
and the dark line was the average for the month.
the dark line is the average for the month,
Right, so the 34 is the average teachers out per day.
2 days. We took the average of 1 day and doubled it because we wanted to compare 2 days to 2 days.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if a teacher or an administrator misses a professional development day due to illness or what have you, how did those continuing education units get made up? How is those hours made up?
It's been a problem in the past with the CEUs. I can remember as a principal working with teachers and providing the information that they missed. We've always supplied more than what is state required as far as hours, so there is some wiggle room. The problem you run into are those teachers that miss several of them in a row. They're on their own. I mean, by law, we have to provide the information. It's in our interest for them to get the information, so we try to make sure that we make up or have them get together with their colleagues to find out what they missed. But it's a huge problem, and that's why they're important. Like we tell kids, if you're gonna be out sick, or if you're gonna be out of class, it's very hard to duplicate the classroom experience. Much the same with PD. It's hard to duplicate those conversations with your colleagues. We can give you the information, but until you can sit and talk with your colleagues, you've missed a lot.
Go back to, I just find these numbers to be somewhat disturbing in the sense that when you, not the days before and after, but the monthly percentages, you know, you're looking at teachers being absent, what you're showing here, anywhere from 11 to 15% every day. I mean, that's, you know, you're looking at 379
I think you have the same question
teachers.
Ken did.
You have,
Same question I had. That dark line is 2 days. They doubled it. So like the 34 for September is actually, you know, it's only 17.
17 days.
So it's 17, so it's
17.
5%, it's 5.5 instead of 11.
oh, okay.
I wanted to show 2 days compared to 2 days, Mr. Nargi, is why I did it that way.
And I guess it isn't as bad.
No.
I was on the same.
Actually, if you're looking at it, I mean, we're probably generally 4 or 5% on a given day.
But there is a contrast with other employees, 126 employees. They seem to be much healthier, percentage-wise.
And again, yeah, I mean, we have some representatives from that particular union here, and they have, I mean, the data speaks for itself. They're showing up Mondays or Fridays before a holiday, and the Tuesdays after. They're here.
But they're here every day during the month.
They're generally here, correct?
Well, percentage-wise.
Yeah, yeah, they do a good job.
Well, I'm just wondering if any staff or if there's a trend to just provide voluntarily doctor's documentation before the 7-day trigger. I mean, you read that and that seems
I will tell you,
excessive.
Mr. Rivero, that recently, unsolicited, if somebody is, I've had many teachers who are gonna be out on a Friday, send in their appointment card or send in the fact that, you know, a note from their doctor, unsolicited, and I'm not asking for that. But I think they're sensitive to the fact that, you know, we're looking at it, but they're also sensitive to the fact that many of our teachers are very, many of our staff members are very conscientious about getting here on a regular basis. But I will also say, and we'll be talking to the unions about some individuals that have a pattern that's disturbing.
We run FERPA training as part of what the state requires.
Yeah,
Okay, so a teacher misses that session and then later has a problem. Is that teacher going to say, I didn't get the training, I'm not responsible, it's the school system's fault?
what we've started to do because of these trends is we've started using faculty meetings for those kinds of trainings that are essential. It's more of a captive audience. I mean, unfortunately, but, you know, they're already there. We require the monthly faculty meeting. For something that's that important, we've been using faculty meetings as opposed to PD days.
The administration, they express the importance of professional development, I agree. Is there a way that we can mandate a makeup for it? I mean, people are sick, that's understandable, that's fine, but even if you are sick, you should, I think, be held accountable to make up for those important days. I don't know how we would do it, I think we discussed at one point maybe online, but it's something that we provide, and I think it's incredibly important, as you guys have pointed out.
Would it be a negotiation point?
In the upcoming year, in the teacher evaluation plan, each teacher's going to have a professional growth plan that's going to be more specifically tailored to what their needs are based on their evaluation. And so that can be more individualized, more small group, more flexible in the time, and the teacher will be accountable at their summative evaluation for demonstrating that they have executed that plan, and they have participated in those types of activities that have been determined to have the greatest impact on their practice and on student outcomes. So some of that is going to be kind of taken care of.
Is it possible for a teacher on their own to get sort of professional development outside of what the school district provides?
Not so much this year. There isn't really a process developed for that. We're doing more sort of grade level, department or whole school types of activities at this point. But as we know from research, sometimes that misses the mark and teachers don't feel it applies to them, and some teachers really benefit greatly from it. So the new professional development model that the state has recommended in legislation tries to customize it so it is more pertinent and relevant. And if it is pertinent and relevant, then you're more motivated to participate in it because you understand the value it has for you professionally.
Now, technically, every time a teacher has a conversation with a colleague or a group of colleagues.
Right.
I've seen in professional development, you can go to the day's development, but then what they do is they make a tape of that development day, and then you can have that material after. Do we do that? So that, or I don't know how much it would cost to do it, but
You don't.
why don't we do it? Why can't we do it?
There would be a cost associated with videotaping whole group presentations, and much of the work that's done, particularly I'm thinking about just this week, was done in small groups. And as Bill alluded to it, it's very difficult to replicate the experience of being part of a conversation about curriculum or instruction or learning. So that would be hard to replicate.
Plus we have over, because we're missing the second page, we had in excess of 23 professional developments going on yesterday.
So it's really spread out. It's not like.
There were
It's not
probably 30 of them.
Everybody all in one room.
So you want to-
Do you want me still to use the slides, or do you want me just to speak to the presentation?
I think you can probably, whatever's easier for you.
I'll switch it over for you.
Thank you, Bill.
The next segment is something I think that we're all a little hesitant to put on an already crowded agenda, but we have to back into a timetable of sharing information with the Board of Education about the changes that are being made in the teacher evaluation plan. On April 15th, the superintendent is going to need to submit drafts of our new teacher evaluation plan and our new administrative evaluation plan to the state for them to examine using a rubric that they've provided to us to make sure that our plan is in alignment with the core requirements that were approved by the State Board of Education in June of last year. And so in an effort to kind of keep you informed about the process that's been in place, you have the presentation that's in your packet. As I said, this was motivated by changes in the law. We have new guidelines for educator evaluation that we need to respect. There were some districts this year, there were, I believe, a total of 10 across the state. Some were district consortiums, some were individual districts that piloted the new evaluation model. And that model is called the SEED model, is in review at this point. In the new teacher evaluation plan, there were some core design principles that were put into place. All of the plans have to respect these design principles that include standards-based measures of performance. There still is some professional judgment and consistency that requires the evaluators to be trained to calibrate so that any individual administrator, if they were to observe a teacher, would give about the same rating. The plan is supposed to be less about judgment and rating of teachers and more specifically about creating a dialogue around student learning that's going to inform professional development, and it's supposed to be something which is capable of being implemented. The multiple measures of performance, there are 4 categories that are determined by the state. Student learning is to count 45%. Teachers' performance and practice 40%, family engagement efforts counts 10%, and then a whole school student performance indicator, our school performance index is 5%. Those percentages, those weightings are captured in legislation, so those were not ones that were negotiable. We've also been given some choice in selecting a performance and practice framework, which would be the items on which we would judge teacher practice, and the 2 that are probably the most well-known are the Connecticut Common Core of Teaching and a new one called the Connecticut Framework for Teacher Evaluation that's based on the Charlotte Danielson model of teacher performance. In our plan, the committee, we had to include a 4-level performance rating, and the committee has designated those categories of ratings. The plan reflects increased supervision so that every teacher gets a complete evaluation every year rather than having our tenured teacher on a cycle where they receive a comprehensive evaluation every 3 years and a standard evaluation in the other years that require fewer observations and less paperwork. There is a timeline that is in place. You must have an orientation, a goal-setting meeting, a mid-year check-in, and a summative conference. And something new, the superintendent is now required by statute to report to this board the status of teacher evaluation, how many teachers were evaluated, sort of aggregate information about their performance level, as well as at the end of the school year, June 30th, to submit a similar report to the commissioner. So the major core requirements, we are going to need to provide extensive training for both the evaluators and for the teachers so that they understand the criteria on which their summative rating will be reached. There is attention in the plan to those who are at the highest and the lowest performing level. We were required to develop a definition for what constitutes an ineffective teacher in the plan. We are required to develop improvement remediation plans for low-performing teachers in the bottom 2 categories, and also to be able to recognize those who are exemplary teachers by giving them opportunities for career growth and development. So how is this different than what we currently have? Our current plan had only 2 performance levels. It had satisfactory and needs improvement. The new one now has 4, so there are more categories. Our current plan is sort of a more holistic determination of performance, where the new plan that the state has been piloting is really sort of a more defined calculation. And that's something that has been a source of a little bit of friction, I think, and contention, because it's reducing teaching to sort of measurable attributes that then can be calculated into a final rating. The one thing that's been sort of problematic for the district is the increased number of required contacts between the evaluator and the teacher. If you have 3 required meetings for goal setting mid-year and end of year, and you have to do a minimum of 3 observations, each one of those contacts could last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And so for each teacher, the principal or the designated evaluator will spend at least 6 hours per teacher on their caseload to complete the evaluation process. And in many of our schools, we have a single school principal who is responsible for the supervision and evaluation of 35 to 40 individual teachers. So a good deal of the principal's time on the job while the teachers are in school will be involved in this process of evaluation and supervision. This is a big increase from our current plan. The reporting requirements I alluded to are an increase that we did not have any before. Now we have those. And student growth and student performance is a significant component in the new plan, where we had built that into our current plan through teachers writing goals to improve student performance. In this one, we're looking at a lot of very specific factors that are demonstrating how a teacher has moved their group, the group of students for whom they're responsible, from a starting point to some better point. The Teacher Evaluation Plan Committee was formed in cooperation with our TEA. There were 3 central office administrators, 3 building level administrators, elementary classroom teachers, an elementary specialist teacher, I believe a music teacher, middle school teacher who was a teacher leader, a coordinating teacher, 3 high school teachers, including one who was a coordinating teacher, and then 1 district-wide coordinating teacher, a specialist in ELL. So it was a very representative committee. We did meet periodically since September. We reviewed all the state materials, the pilot that's underway, research, and had a series of very spirited discussions over some issues that, where there were disagreements. There were 3 major revisions in the draft that we produced that reflected the consensus of the group. The draft was reviewed by the committee using the rubric that the state will be using to make sure it had everything it needs to have. In order to implement this new plan, there will be costs, and these costs could vary greatly depending upon how much support the State Department of Education provides. If they do an RFP for a data management tool, if we align with a framework on which the state is willing to offer training. As I've attended meetings around the state, it's become clear that the state has given us the directive, and they say, you figure out whatever works best in your district. And so based on the availability of time, resources, and staff to do the work, we have to plug into a plan that it's going to be very cost effective for us, that we're going to be able to do and that we can afford to do. So we're not looking to shopping for the most expensive data management tool with all the bells and whistles, and we're not looking to privately contract with providers for training. We'll do whatever we can in-house, but we're also looking for both the training and the data management for whatever assistance the state can provide. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to monitor recommendations from the groups that are meeting, that have the ability to make decisions about this process, and look at the governor's budget for recommendations to support teacher evaluation. That has been included in his preliminary budget thus far. The committee will reconvene to make adjustments in the draft if there are any changes in which programs the state chooses to support. And we'll also consider phase-in options that have been approved recently. Originally, the plan was to be fully implemented by July of 2013, and in a recent turn of events within the past 2 weeks, 2013-14 has been declared a bridge year during which the districts can go through the process of transitioning from their current plan to the new plan. A next step that I left out is that given this sort of background about what's going on at the next board meeting in March, I'll be able to share with you a draft of the teacher evaluation plan because you will need to review and consider it so that when we support it, we can say it's pending board approval. And so you will at that time also have an opportunity to provide any input. Along with the plan, I will supply you with the rubric that the state has given to us so that you know where we had the latitude to make certain decisions and where our hands were basically tied by state statute in terms of things that we had to put in. So that would be a next step that you'll see a draft of that plan coming up.
this is going to be similar to the technology plan that we had to approve, that we had to approve it just so it could be submitted, so they could tell us the plan they want us to use. We're gonna essentially end up with the same thing here. We'll see it next month. We have to approve for them to submit it to get the corrections back that the state wants in it. So it'll
That's essentially.
kind of basically be the same thing as we did for the technology. It's more paperwork for somebody to pass an article. Thank you. Action items. Action item A, certified nurse assistant course approval. Can I get a motion? From Vincent, second by Chris. Discussion. See, oh, yes, absolutely.
So the course approval would just be that we approve having the course, but it doesn't necessarily tie us into a
May
budgetary
not be
item for
funded,
next year.
you know.
Right, it's really, okay.
Just puts it on the list of available.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Mr. Mayor. B, special request field trip Philadelphia Thanksgiving Day Parade. Do I have a motion? Chris, a second. Vincent. Discussion. Fiona.
It was my understanding that our policy was that we were not going to approve individual field trips, but once a year, we would see them all come forward. And I believe when the Italian, I think it was a trip to Italy last year, and we denied putting them on the agenda because we were only going to look at them once a year. So I'm just asking a procedural question, because I don't want to have us be in a position of deciding who gets special admittance onto the agenda and who doesn't.
The Italian trip last year was a funding issue. They were trying to get on the agenda so they could fundraise in advance. This is actually a registration deadline that will pass before our May meeting.
Did they just find out about the trip, or?
From what I understand, they were just, yes.
Just a policy point to make. The policy does allow for unusual invitations or experiences that come up during the year. I think one of the examples we've used before is the Cherry Blossom Festival, or the opportunity to go, you've been invited to go perform somewhere. So Fiona, you're right. The policy does say that we get them in a group at one of the board meetings, I believe it's in May. But the policy also allows for these kinds of opportunities that come our way.
Considered rare opportunities.
That would not have been anticipated in the prior May. And this was, I think they received the invitation February 1st.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Do we have information from the parents' response to this? Obviously, this is taking the parents and the child away from the rest of their family for Thanksgiving to go down to Philadelphia Day Parade. I can understand Macy's Day Parade, I can understand the Rose Bowl, I can understand a lot of very large, prestigious parades. I've never even heard of the Philadelphia Thanksgiving Day Parade. I'm sure it's very big down there, but obviously I'd be curious to hear what the families were thinking before I start turning around and recommending that we approve sending their children away. And now the kids are all excited because they can go down to Philadelphia, and the parents are now sitting there going, well, I guess we don't have a choice, family.
When the request was submitted, we kind of had that conversation about which comes first. Do we tell the parents about it and see whether or not there's sufficient interest, or does it make more sense to see whether or not the board would support this? Because if you seek parental support first and you do all the work that's necessary on that side, and then the board doesn't approve it, then it's a done deal. So I think the decision was made to request for this to be on the agenda to see if the board would even approve it, and if the board doesn't approve it, that's the end of it. If the board approves it, then the parents may say, no, I don't want to be away for Thanksgiving, I want to be in my home on Thanksgiving. If the board approves it and the parents are behind it, but they don't fundraise enough money, then that's another opportunity for this trip not to take place. So I think they were seeking approval as sort of a gateway to say, is it worth pursuing with the families? Is it worth pursuing for the fundraising? Because the board has the ultimate decision about whether you grant permission to go
Do we
to
have
leave
an
the district
idea
or
of how
not.
many days students would miss from regular school to go down for this trip?
A half a day.
Just
A
one half a day?
Yeah, the Wednesday, half a day on Wednesday.
If you want to be amused by anything, read what W.C. Fields had to say about Philadelphia and what his epitaph is. But to address your point, Dan, I think that this is just the new name. We sell everything now, naming rights to everything. Isn't this just the old Mummers Parade?
Yes,
Which is
no,
an
Mummers
old-
is New Year's.
New Year's, okay, then I'm confused about that, but I know this parade has been around a long time too, because it's the parade you can watch if you don't want to watch Macy's parade on NBC. You can watch this one on ABC, I guess.
But they do have a registration deadline of March 1st.
Probably a good idea. Why don't we keep kids away from this?
My only other concern is $500 per student on top of all the additional field trips
Yeah,
that they're doing.
that may kill it there. I mean,
It's a lot of money, and
I think they're seeking the board's blessing. If the board blesses it, they'll talk with the parents to see whether or not the parents want to be out, and then they'll see whether they can raise the money, and if they raise the money, then they go, and if they don't, then they don't go. But they don't go at all if this group doesn't sanction the trip. So they want to know that up front.
One motion?
We have a motion by Chris and seconded by Vincent. We're in discussion.
It says here that the band will have a clinic, but nowhere in one day, 2 or 3 is there a clinic. There's sightseeing, shopping, historical park, museum.
Mr. Spencer was here earlier.
That's a lot of money.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those, you're in favor, Andrew?
Yes.
All those opposed? Okay, so we had a 4-3. Okay, financial statements, Mr. Rivera. Motion for your financial statement?
Yeah,
Excellent.
They're great.
Second by Fiona. Discussion. Fiona, second. Discussion? Oh, Andrew?
Before I discuss any specific point, I guess I'm having a little problem understanding where you go year-to-date transaction and then budgeted year-to-date transactions. What does that?
That's, see the little hyphen, it's budget minus year-to-date transactions. So it's just subtracting it so you know how, what the balance is. It's the balance of that account.
Okay, so the year-to-date transaction is the amount that was
Minus.
actually spent.
Correct.
And then so for example, when I look at substitute teachers, I see year-to-date transaction, 132,069, that's on the first page, 5,100 series. And then budgeted minus year-to-date transaction, so it's shown a negative $11,000.
Correct. Because we've already expended more than we budgeted. And we're projecting to be in the hole about 50,000 at year end.
And is there one specific thing that?
There was a few things that happened this year. We have, not to get into detail, we've had
You can, there's been several serious illnesses that require day-to-day sub. Didn't necessarily equate to a long-term, one-year contract, but we had to use subs to fill.
And so those subs go under that line item instead of the Kelly line
Right.
item? Because the Kelly line item only picks up the daily subs. If someone's gonna be out for an extended period of time, they're looked at as a long-term sub, which then falls under that category.
Maternity, things like that.
It's an account that it's really hard to budget for, we just don't know. Some years we're fine, other years, if we have a lot of maternity leaves, illnesses, we go over. But our hope is that it will offset in the salary line item because that person may or may not get paid anymore if they run out of sick time.
Danielle, didn't that get cut in 11th hour last year?
It did, yeah, that's,
already cutting the difference.
yeah.
Next question is expulsion / homebound, which is 5121-3. We only spent $2,200 approximately.
Right.
We actually expelled someone, and it's only costing us 20. We certainly budgeted a great deal more.
Well, this is what happened with the tutors this year. It was more of a guessing game this year. We stay with the same total dollar amount for tutors, but what's different this year than in years past is I broke it up by what they are for expulsion, ISS room, regular ed, so we knew moving forward where our big money is landing for the tutors. So I didn't know where to position them, so just because we never broken it out in detail before, so as long as the total balance comes in, then I'll know for future years how to separate out the money.
Okay.
Because you see they're all zero for prior year to date, because they never were broken out that way
Right.
before.
On legal, we're doing quite well,
Yes.
which is always nice to see. Means people are getting along, we're in harmony here. I have the serial consequences. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Spoke too soon.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That was unanimous. Consent agenda. A motion from Fiona, second by Dan. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, comments for good of the order. John?
No.
Carl? Chris? Ellen?
No.
Fiona?
No.
Andrew?
It's just, with talking to the superintendent about her philosophy of discipline / rehabilitation of students that are problematic. I was wondering if we as a board could somehow have some type of maybe a discussion item on that topic so that you can present what you think, you know, how you like to handle and how you have your administrators handling students that are, let's just call them, again, problematic for whatever reason they may be in some type of structure. And then see what other board members, if that's the philosophy that other board members have, or they would like to see a different type of balance.
Amy? None. Okay. Committee reports. Danny? Personnel?
Well, you've seen the big report from Mr. Jocelyn just a few moments ago. Outside of that, the only thing that's really been going on is we've been having some discussions about adding in some other special groups to part of the para contract, but at this point, that's still just discretionary. So, aside from that, we've had no major personnel issues, and we're looking forward to the next series, where, as we found out tonight, we'll have IT come in to start talking about staff education of how to best utilize the technology services the district offers.
Okay, thank you. Policy.
Well, we had our first read on the wellness policy. It'll be coming back to us in March and hopefully to the board. The students came in and gave an update on electronic use. We're going to go through suspension and expulsion, fundraising, graduation, and attendance.
Quiet.
Quiet. Quiet. Do we have no school improvement? Budget.
Budget time.
Ed Connection.
Yeah, Ed Connection. Policy Council for Early Head Start and Head Start was canceled due to the snowstorm, so there's nothing to report from there. But the meeting of the Board of Directors at Ed Connection in Litchfield was an interesting one. One of the topics of discussion was an article in Connecticut Magazine that talked about consolidating all of Connecticut school districts into 6, conveniently along the lines of the refs. But that's another story. If you want, I can email you a scanned copy of that if you want to read it for yourself. Interesting article, interesting things to think about. But the important thing in that board of directors meeting was they issued the governor's ECS budget implementation proposal. And that prompted me to first look at what you're going to get. And Torrington is up 0.43, Cheryl?
104,000.
Yeah, 104,000, which is less than half of 1%. Sort of interesting. And then you look at some other figures which I have sent out to you, and I'm referring to that sheet that has the green table on it that shows how we compare, Torrington compares to area towns, and then it also shows interesting things about what else is going on in the state. We get 0.43, less than 0.5%. There are places getting, what's the highest, 15%? I don't have it. 15.97. And there are probably a dozen or maybe 8 or 9 there that are getting more than 5% more money. Okay, so why can this be? Well, remember the meeting we had in August when the legislators showed up, lots of smoke, lots of mirrors, but the promise that the ECS formula was going to change. There was a task force, we were told, get in touch with these people. I could send that out to you if you want to, the task force report. But the governor, when he put his proposal together, took at least some elements of that. And I haven't done point by point. Of course, they write laws so that you can't do that. It's like buying a car or something like that. You know, you just can't ever line them up next to each other and do an apples to apples, oranges to oranges comparison. But what it comes down to, the best I could do was to run off the other report that I sent out, the Legislative Research Report, the OLR Research Report, with my snide annotations, and to start the explanation for the formula. Very difficult to explain, and they like it like that, right? Because you can't understand it, so anything they do, they can get away with, and they can just babble you, and babble at you, and confuse you, and confound you. But I also sent you the link to the governor's proposal for this year, and that's at the end of my report with all of the comments on it. And if you want a laugh or a good cry, depending on the mood you're in, you can go to that link to find HB 06357, which is the governor's plan, which includes his formula, his rationale, and the entire table of expenditures. And then, if you still haven't sunk far enough into despair, you can read the testimony that was offered, transcripts of what, and I watched a lot of that hearing. It's impossible, you can't watch it for too long, it's just overbearing, it's just overwhelming. And unless you're wearing boots, you can't listen to it anyway. But you could read those if you want, and get some idea of how everybody is standing in line. It's like watching Queen for a Day. If any of you are old enough to remember that show, where people would stand up and give the biggest sob story they could, and at the end of the show, one of the 3 or 4 of them would be awarded whatever they needed the most, a new washing machine, a car so their husband could get to work, or an iron lung for their kid, or whatever it was that they needed. And that's what this testimony reads like. But, and I guess it was Bismarck who's supposed to have said, he really didn't, but supposed to have said, you really don't want to see 2 things happen. You don't want to see sausage being made, you don't want to see laws being made. And this is exactly what we're looking at here. This law is going to be this malcontrivance, but it's going to satisfy, it's going to get enough votes to get passed. Because everybody's going to look at this, then they're going to want to tweak the formula, or they're going to want to tweak the numbers, which is worse yet. They're going to go outside the formula and just say, well, Thomaston should get, whatever. Look at the number of towns which are getting 0 on that too, right? Imagine that. Now what, I didn't really take a close look at that, but to me what it looks like is those are the towns with either a lot of money or they're members of regional systems. And those people got really hurt by this. We got hurt. They got hurt worse. Although, how much worse can you get hurt than what little we're getting? And Mr. Traub can fill you in on, if you're happy about, look, we're getting 104,000 more, Mr. Traub can fill you in on what else happens.
And we're losing
Whatever
10
that
times.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We're gonna lose over $1 million, but we're gonna get 100.
Anyway, thank you for indulging me by listening to that. If you have any questions, by all means, please ask them, but not necessarily here. Call or send me an email or catch me up.
There was the one other report that you did have on that ECS.
The task force.
The task force came up with a findings. And their finding is, we just can't afford to do anything but what we're currently doing, and any formula would be unjust, so they're going to just assign numbers and not use a formula.
Yeah.
But that was the basic, well, we flat funded it, we really can't afford it, so we're just gonna keep, their recommendation was to just continue on with the same numbers for a couple more years.
Yeah, your tax dollars.
That's it. They didn't retweak it or anything, just can't do it.
I was going to suggest to use the increase to get our own lobbyist, so that we could, get our money back for everything they're taking away.
Sorry, Tim is not the queen tonight.
No washer for you.
That's what I hear.
Okay. THS Oversight Panel, back to you.
I'm still working on talking to people in Midget Avenue. I'm almost done there, and I've had very good luck there. And Mrs. Domenico was good enough to get me a copy of the NEAS report, and that's another thing you get mired in. But I have that. People have been approaching me. This has attracted a little bit of attention. I don't know if anyone's mentioned it to any of you, but I've had people call me. I've got a couple emails, and I've had people I've just been talking to say, hey, we'll talk about this for a couple minutes. So it's happening, and I will eventually get to the high school and actually talk to people there. But that's what's going on. Question? Thank you.
Bonus.
Aside from what Ellen has mentioned, reached out to wellness coordinator with the state of Connecticut. They were impressed with what we've done so far and gave us some more suggestions. We have another meeting tomorrow, and I'm just going to go again through policy for approval to bring you guys.
Excellent. Juvenile court update.
We're working on it.
Working on it. Okay. Items for upcoming agenda. We'll have financial statements, committee reports, school projects for referendums, Ford schools, Forbes school solar, forget it. Technology RFP.
Teacher
And-
evaluation
Teacher evaluation plan for a second read, okay. Yeah. We're gonna do a budget?
No.
All right, teacher eval. Does anyone have any desire to bring our legislators back before the budget is set and they voted and get any other questions answered that we didn't get answered in August?
It would be fun.
Eh?
Are they gonna come? Why would they come?
They're gonna be too busy doing budget is what we're gonna hear.
We'll invite them.
Well, we go till 11, they can stop on their way back into town.
Okay.
What
And
you're
budget.
telling me on this revenue sharing that we talked about, there is no legal standard, there's no definition of how that formula actually has to be implemented, so that when we look at how that formula is set by law, we say this is the proper amount of money that a district such as ours, with the type of demographics that we have, we're actually getting our fair share of money.
But it's been frozen since.
Yeah.
They've never funded it.
If you go through the handout that we gave out, that John gave out tonight, it actually gives you the formula. It's in there with all of its variables and how it works, and you could plug it in. But they have overrode the formula since 2009. They have just said, not doing the formula. And the governor suggests it, and the legislature passes it, and then that's law, that's it.
I guess the issue that I have is, we create a budget where we have to, and then the city has to provide money for our education, even though they kind of tweak how much money, they have to provide a certain standard for our education, and they have to give us the money. The state, based on what our needs are, they're giving us absolutely the correct amount of money. You're positive that we've got.
No,
No.
they're not funding it.
No.
They're underfunded.
As they said, they're 76% underfunded right now. 76%, that's a huge number. They just don't have the money, so they're not doing it.
But we can't hold them accountable.
Have elections
We-
on office.
So then how are they gonna hold us accountable on these mandates that they have? So we as a board, we can just act more independently and say, we're not going to do these things that are going to cost us $5,000 a year and $10,000 a year.
Then they hold back their
Yeah,
27
they
What?
won't, they won't even send the funding then.
They hold back their 27 million. See, unfortunately, those with the money control the outcome.
The state is the sovereign entity. We aren't. We are creatures of the state. Every municipality in Connecticut is a creature, a created being of the state. We have to do what they tell us.
Okay, future meetings. Special budget meeting on the 27th. That's when the superintendent will be presenting us with our budget. That's next Wednesday. That is
That's a budget committee though, that's not part of that, that's a
special budget committee. You're giving it to the budget committee.
correct,
Okay. And that's at midget.
correct.
Okay.
At 6?
Ed?
Is it here?
No?
I think it's here. I need to invite this here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's here. Thinking that we'd get more people.
Well, sounds like you will, so we probably should come here anyways.
No, yeah.
The 27th is here?
Let me double check this.
I don't know, 6 or 7?
Whatever's on the invite, it's what it is.
It says midget.
It says midget on the invite?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's midget.
At what time?
At 6?
6 o'clock? Cool.
Is that still in the subcommittee?
Yep. Budget committee meeting on March 6th,
That's,
regular budget.
yeah.
That's at midget.
Mhm.
Personnel committee on the 13th, regular Board of Ed meeting on the 13th. Policy committee, no March meeting.
Yeah, we are,
Well, March 6th.
we are.
I was told by, Mrs. Batchelder that there wouldn't be a policy meeting in March.
I thought no school
There's
improvement.
no school improvement in March.
Right.
No, it's because of.
Both are
budget.
still on the calendar.
Yeah, we're still doing.
So,
You're s-
policy is March 6th.
Yeah.
I don't think that's on the calendar on our
That's not what
website.
I
It
got.
isn't. Budget's budget.
Yeah, we added all the budget committees.
Right.
So we like moved it in August.
Get a March policy?
No,
Count your blessings.
Well, they're all three of them are so.
there should be no policy and no school improvement.
If you want,
Ellen, do you wanna have yours?
Can we discuss?
you can discuss and add a
Okay.
date, we just have to
I'll discuss
post it.
later.
Okay. Number 10, motion for adjournment.
So
Dan, who says, Carl, we'll give you a second.
Did we vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Consent agenda.
Oh, you're doing, I'm not doing,
They're not doing,
uh,
the legal opinion was just, they're supposed to be consent, because,
put in.
well, the thing with it, Andrew, is on the subcommittee one, we don't actually vote on, we only receive.
All those in favor of the motion to adjourn?
Oh, I'm sorry, all those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, unanimous. Thank you, Dan.
Deb, thanks for taking care